The moment my future mother-in-law demanded the PIN to my bank card, something inside me instantly shut down. It was not fear, it was not confusion, it was clarity. A cold, sharp realization that every uncomfortable moment I had ignored over the past year had been warning me about the same thing. The man I was about to marry was never going to protect me from his mother, because he had spent his entire life obeying her. 10 minutes later, he tried to hit me in the hallway outside his apartment, and that was the exact second I understood how close I had come to ruining my own future. My name is Naomi Bennett, and until that day, I honestly believed I had found the kind of love people spend years searching for. I met Caleb Mercer during a corporate networking event hosted by the financial firm where I worked as a loan specialist in San Francisco. I almost skipped the event because I had already worked a 10-hour shift and wanted nothing more than to go home, shower, and sleep. But one of my coworkers convinced me to stay for at least an hour, and that decision changed everything. Caleb arrived with one of his friends from a cybersecurity company nearby. The first thing I noticed about him was how calm he seemed compared to everyone else in the room. While other people were trying too hard to impress strangers, Caleb listened carefully whenever someone spoke. He had warm brown eyes, a quiet smile, and the kind of steady voice that immediately made people comfortable around him. We ended up talking for almost the entire evening near the balcony overlooking the city lights. He told me he worked as a software engineer, lived alone outside the city, and dreamed about having a peaceful family life someday. After years of disappointing relationships, Caleb felt safe, mature, and dependable. For months, our relationship felt almost perfect. We spent weekends exploring small coastal towns, cooking dinner together, and planning imaginary vacations we hoped to take one day. He remembered little details about me that nobody else noticed. He brought me coffee exactly the way I liked it without ever asking twice. When he proposed during a weekend trip to Carmel, I said yes before he could even finish asking the question. Standing there with the ocean behind us, I genuinely believed I was beginning the happiest chapter of my life. The first crack appeared shortly after we got engaged. One evening, we sat at his apartment organizing our wedding guest list. I wanted a small ceremony with close friends and immediate family because weddings in California were expensive enough already. Caleb barely looked up from his phone before casually mentioning that his mother expected us to invite every relative she had ever spoken to in the last 20 years. According to him, there would probably be another 50 guests added because she would feel embarrassed otherwise. I laughed at first because I assumed he was joking. He was not. When I explained that we could not afford such a massive wedding without putting ourselves into debt, Caleb simply shrugged and told me his mother believed weddings were about family reputation. Something about the way he said it bothered me. It sounded less like a discussion and more like a rule that had already been decided. That was when I truly began noticing Evelyn Mercer. Evelyn was one of those women who carried authority into every room without ever raising her voice. She had worked as a department supervisor for decades and treated every conversation like she was conducting a business meeting. Ever since her husband died years earlier, her entire life revolved around Caleb. She visited his apartment constantly, reorganized his kitchen cabinets, bought his groceries, and still picked out clothes for him sometimes. The strangest part was that Caleb acted like all of this was completely normal. At first, I tried hard to get along with her. I thanked her whenever she brought food over and listened politely to her endless advice about marriage and family life. But after a while, I realized Evelyn did not simply want to help, she expected control. One afternoon, she proudly announced that she had already chosen the bridal boutique where I should buy my wedding dress because one of her friends worked there and could give us a discount. I thanked her kindly and explained that I had already selected a dress from another boutique downtown. The second I said that, her expression hardened. She criticized the price immediately and called my choice unnecessary. Then she looked directly at Caleb, clearly expecting him to support her. Instead of defending me properly, he gave one weak sentence about it being my decision before quickly retreating into silence. Evelyn stormed into the kitchen banging pots around while Caleb stared at his phone pretending nothing awkward had happened. That became the pattern of our engagement. Evelyn controlled everything, Caleb avoided conflict. And I slowly lost pieces of my patience trying to keep the peace. Within weeks, Evelyn had completely taken over our wedding planning. She selected the venue, changed the menu, hired decorators, and even booked transportation without discussing any of it with me first. When I confronted Caleb, He admitted he had already transferred money to his mother because she had started making arrangements. I remember standing there feeling invisible, while the man I was supposed to marry avoided eye contact like a guilty teenager. Every single argument ended the same way. "Please just be patient. She means well, everything will calm down after the wedding." But it never calmed down. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Evelyn arrived carrying several large bags filled with household items she proudly described as my starter kitchen. Inside were heavy cast iron pans, embroidered towels, and outdated cookware that looked older than I was. When I politely explained that I already owned my own kitchen supplies and preferred modern cookware, Evelyn immediately criticized my choices and started lecturing me about how women should maintain a proper household. Again, Caleb stood there trying not to upset anyone instead of standing beside me. That was when the doubt inside me truly began growing. A week before the wedding, Caleb asked for access to my bank card. At first I honestly thought he was kidding. When I asked why he would possibly need that, he explained that married couples should share everything and that it would be easier if he could use my card whenever necessary. The request made my stomach tighten immediately. I told him if an emergency ever happened, I could simply tell him the PIN at the time. Caleb instantly became defensive and accused me of not trusting him. That conversation stayed in my mind for days afterward because deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then came the afternoon that ended everything. I arrived at Caleb's apartment carrying paperwork for our courthouse appointment, still hoping the tension between us was temporary. Caleb was in the shower when I arrived, so Evelyn invited me inside and offered tea. Looking back now, I should have walked out the second I saw her sitting there waiting for me alone. At first, the conversation seemed harmless. She asked about my work schedule and casually mentioned finances. Then she smiled and calmly asked me to give her the PIN number to my bank card, so she could help manage groceries and household expenses after the wedding. I remember staring at her because I genuinely thought I had misunderstood what she said. When I refused politely, her face changed instantly. She accused me of being selfish and claimed real families shared everything. Moments later, Caleb walked into the room while she was still complaining. I waited for him to tell her she had crossed a line. Instead, he frowned at me and asked why I was making such a big deal out of something so small. That sentence changed everything. In that exact moment, I finally saw my future clearly. A lifetime of surrendering my boundaries to keep his mother satisfied while Caleb stood quietly beside her pretending everything was normal. So I stood up, grabbed my purse, and calmly told them there would not be a wedding. The silence that followed felt unreal. Caleb looked stunned. Evelyn immediately started yelling about how I was humiliating their family. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, but strangely, I also felt relief for the first time in months. I walked toward the door without another word. Caleb followed me into the hallway. At first, he tried arguing and insisting I was overreacting. Then his anger exploded. He grabbed my arm painfully hard and accused me of acting entitled before we were even married. I told him to let go, but instead his grip tightened while Evelyn shouted from the apartment doorway that he needed to fix the situation immediately. Then Caleb raised his fist. Everything after that happened on instinct. I stepped sideways and drove my knee directly into him with every ounce of force I had. His entire body folded instantly as he collapsed against the wall, clutching himself in agony. The sound that came out of him echoed through the hallway while Evelyn screamed and rushed toward her son in complete panic. I stood there shaking from adrenaline, staring at the man I almost married, and realized I felt absolutely no regret, not even a little. Without another word, I walked downstairs and out of the building while their screams followed behind me. The second I got into the taxi, I blocked Caleb on every app, every social media account, and every phone number connected to him. When I finally reached home, I collapsed onto my couch and cried harder than I had cried in years. Not because I lost him, because I escaped him. Over the next few weeks, Caleb tried desperately to contact me through fake numbers and new accounts. Evelyn even showed up outside my workplace screaming that I had destroyed her son's life. I ignored every message and every insult because for the first time in months, I trusted myself again. Nearly a year later, I met Mason Hale. Mason was everything Caleb pretended to be: kind, independent, emotionally mature. He respected boundaries without needing them explained twice. On our third date, I told him the entire story about my canceled wedding, the bank card incident, and the fight in the hallway. He listened quietly for a long moment before shaking his head. Then he smiled slightly and said something I never forgot. Anyone who truly loves you will never ask you to shrink yourself so someone else can feel bigger. That sentence healed something inside me. 2 years later, Mason and I got married during a quiet ceremony near the ocean with only our closest friends and family present. No screaming relatives, no controlling mother-in-law making decisions for us. No tension hiding behind fake smiles, just peace. During our first dance, Mason wrapped his arms around me while soft music played in the background. The ocean breeze drifted through the open windows, and for a moment, everything felt unbelievably calm. He leaned closer and quietly asked if I was happy. I looked around the room at the people who truly loved us, then back at the man holding me, and smiled with complete certainty. Very happy, and deep inside, the memory of that hallway no longer felt painful, it felt powerful. Because sometimes the worst moment of your life is actually the moment you finally save yourself.